Hello, Aubrey. How's everything going? Happy Saturday.
I'm great. Happy Saturday to you, Lindsay. How are you?
Yeah, so excited that we're publishing on Saturdays now for our listeners. I'm doing great, but I do have a question for you.
Okay, let's hear it.
So, do you often buy seconds,
Yes.
like
This
seconds, minutes? What am I
Mhm.
even talking about?
Yeah, you're talking about like from an outlet store, right? There's near us, we have Nordstrom Rack. There's Nordstrom you may have heard of, and then there's Nordstrom Rack where you can buy seconds, anything that didn't sell at Nordstrom. And then there's what's called Last Chance in Phoenix, Arizona. It's like everything that doesn't
Oh,
sell at Nordstrom Rack, and that's where you can really get the deals.
interesting. Good to know. Good to know. Do you go shopping a lot?
I don't. I really hate shopping actually. But when I do, I go for the clearance. I go for seconds. And this
Yeah.
came up recently. You and Michelle were chatting, and I heard you say the word seconds. You were talking about outlet stores and said
Yeah.
that's where you buy seconds. And I hadn't heard it referred to that, or at least not recently. So I
Yeah.
Googled it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's what they call it, seconds, when you like buy something that didn't sell at a regular retail store, right?
Yeah, it's you don't hear it very much, but I grew up in New England and there are a lot of retail store doing secondhand or second stores in Maine, Kittery, Maine, kind of famous for that kind of outlet. And
Yes.
so, yeah, you hear it sometimes. So we're introducing something new to our listeners today. Yeah?
Yes, because I immediately, like, highlighted that as vocabulary in the app
Yeah.
because I knew, like, "Oh, this is interesting, this is unique," and you almost said secondhand there, which means something different. So we're
Means
going
something
into
different.
some
Yeah.
vocab sort of related, but that does mean different things, and we wanna
Yes.
make sure that you are using the app. That's the best way to learn new vocabulary and follow along with the transcripts.
Yes, and we just did a new release on the app, and that's why we want to make sure you guys know. I mean, it is the best way to listen to the podcast ad free. So on the app, you won't hear any commercials coming in from with other voices that you don't know. You won't hear those ads on the app, Aubrey. What else do our listeners get over on the app if they listen there?
Yeah, you can also listen at different speeds that aren't available on the average podcast player. This is really
Mm-hmm.
nice for me because 2 times even 1.5 is sometimes too fast. Sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I want to have it be a little more specific. So you have
Yeah.
that opportunity on the app. And we also have a special bonus feed for premium users. So these bonus episodes are amazing and bonus role plays, a lot over there that you don't want to miss.
Yeah, some new stuff coming in there that you definitely want to check out. So a better way to listen, guys, is the app. So go over to allearsenglish.com/app. We have it for iOS and Android and check it out. Check it out.
Awesome.
Okay.
Yes. All right.
Yeah.
So let's dive in. The episode I was referring to, if you guys missed it, you don't remember this conversation, go back and listen to 2240. Lindsay and Michelle were talking about outlets and some of this shopping vocabulary. They mentioned seconds. So don't miss that one. Hit follow if you missed it. And we're
Yeah.
going to go into some sort of related vocab today.
Yeah, I'm excited to get into it. So let's define seconds. When we talk about seconds in the shopping world, Aubrey, let's just break it down again to be very clear.
Yeah, they're also called factory seconds.
Yeah.
And I've also seen them online referred to as factory rejects or simply
Yes.
seconds. And they're
Mhm.
just retail items that there may be like a minor fault of manufacture or maybe not. They may have like over purchased, right? And so then
Right.
they're sold for some reason to the public at a reduced rate at outlets or right. It's often
Yeah.
due to overproduction, is what I've read. So often there are no mistakes with these.
Yeah, and even if there are mistakes, you probably wouldn't be able to notice it,
So
right? It's
minor.
not like we're saying they're missing a sleeve, right?
Exactly. Not that extreme, right? Maybe a hem is a tiny bit off or something.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there are lots of places in the US and probably where you live. I actually would be really curious to hear from our listeners. Come to YouTube, leave us a comment. Do you
Mhm.
purchase seconds? Do you have outlet stores where you live?
Yeah, outlet shopping is a whole thing. Some people love it, just love outlet shopping. I think Michelle loves it. I think she must have mentioned that in that episode,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
For
but there is
sure.
a different meaning of seconds. When you first said it, this is the meaning I'm more familiar with,
Yeah,
which is when you go back to get a second helping of food, right? Some people
right.
say a second helping, some people just say seconds. I'm going back for seconds.
Yes, that is much more common, I would say. When we're talking about eating and sitting down with the family for dinner, did you get seconds? Do you want seconds? Much
Right.
more common, I
I
would
might
say.
say to my kids, don't get seconds until everyone has had a first helping.
Yeah, right, for sure. For sure. Okay, so those are the two meanings. Now there's a second meaning. We can expand off of this idea, Aubrey. What is it?
Yeah, well, this I think is what really makes this confusing. We want to make sure to
Yes.
clarify today because the same word, second, is in the phrase, the adjective secondhand. This is very
Mhm.
different, right? Seconds from a
Totally.
factory, these are still new. No one has already purchased and worn these, but a very
Totally.
similar word, secondhand, means it is previously used or owned.
It's true, and I almost really confused our listeners because I almost
You
used
caught
them
yourself though.
interchangeably at the top of the show, but they're not the same at all, right? Because thrift
Right.
stores are where you would get secondhand clothing. For example, Poshmark, ThredUp, Thrifted.com, or even Salvation Army, right? That kind of
Right.
thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there are a lot of thrift stores, retail stores where you can go in person, and this has become a big thing online. A lot of those companies you just listed
Oh,
now provide the secondhand clothing, thrifted clothing online. This was I mean it's been around for a few years, but I remember this sort of being a big deal. That was like, "Oh my goodness, I can buy secondhand clothing online?" What?
I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, because
Interesting.
often
Okay.
it's interesting, some thrift stores you go and there is no, like, fitting room, a place where you would try something on. It's sort of
Uh,
just like you buy it, take it home, try it on, and too bad. You might not be able to return clothing. It's a little bit different
mhm.
situation than the average retail store.
I see, and then there's also secondhand bookstores, which a lot of people just love,
Yes,
books.
I actually mentioned I was planning this episode when we had an open conversation club, and Aden, one of our amazing listeners from Brazil, who often is an open conversation club, got really excited. She was like, "I love secondhand bookstores." And I agree with her. We were able to like really bond about that. I love the smell of a secondhand bookstore, like
Yes.
older books or something. You just want to be able to touch them and smell them. I love it.
Oh, they're usually so quaint and
Yes,
small and just such a clear love for books from the owners, right? You could just tell there's a respect for literature and reading. I love that.
totally.
It's a very unique place.
Yes. So we have a
Yes,
few
yes.
examples here. You could say, "Can you believe I found this secondhand?" If you have a shirt that you like love and you found it at a thrift store, it looks brand
Yep.
new.
Mhm. Or I'm gonna try to find a costume secondhand. They're so expensive online. That's a good idea.
Oh yeah.
There should be like a marketplace where people swap, Halloween costumes. That'd be
There probably
brilliant.
is, right?
I'm
I'll
sure
bet that
there is.
exists online now. I know a lot of thrift stores at Halloween time bring out all of the Halloween costumes. Great place to go
Yeah.
get a costume because you don't need that brand new, especially if you're wearing it like over your other clothing.
Yeah. When I was a kid, we used to always make our Halloween costumes. We never even thought about buying it. We used to have to just, like,
You have to
make it
be
or
creative. Your
find
parents are
something
like,
in our
"See what
parents'
you can figure."
closet, put it on. Yeah, kind of.
That's awesome. We
Yeah.
had these Halloween bins where it was like, "Go find
Yeah.
something in the bin. Do your
That's
best."
cool. I love that, do your best. And then what would be another sample sentence with
Yeah,
secondhand book?
you're talking about secondhand bookstores, you might ask someone, "What's your favorite secondhand bookstore?" Just like Aden and I found out we had this in common. What a great way to connect when you find out you both love something like this. Go deeper, right? Where's your favorite place to buy used books?
Yeah, and I know a famous one in New York is the Strand. I don't know if they're secondhand though. Are they secondhand or the Strand, right,
Yes,
Aubrey,
I know Strand, but
downtown?
I feel like
Yeah,
it's new books. I feel like
it's
it's
new
more like a
books.
Barnes& and
Yeah.
Noble or Borders where it's new books, I think.
I think it is, but it's more from what I understand, it's more of like an icon, less
Yes.
commercial, less
Yes.
corporate, and more of an icon for downtown New York, NYU area. They love it because you see
Yeah.
people going around with the logo, the bags. You know what I'm talking
Totally.
about?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. We used to go to Strand a lot. It's huge in there, and I bet they do have a secondhand section at least. I bet they
probably.
have some used books in there as well.
Mhm, for sure. So, anyways, good New York City insider knowledge. What's number 3,
Yeah,
Aubrey?
so just to say used, this means the same as secondhand. You might say used clothing, used books, right? It means the same
Mhm.
thing. You might say, I love finding cool vintage used clothing, but thrifting definitely takes more time than regular shopping.
Thrifting, interesting as a verb. Huh, okay.
Yes,
I
right?
like
I like to
that.
thrift. I like
Ooh.
thrifting. Yeah, we use it
That
as a verb
is
that way.
probably gonna be in the app as a keyword,
Absolutely.
don't you think? Yeah,
Yes,
for sure.
definitely, right? Make sure you
Yes.
have the apps so you can get all this great vocab. It's fun to use it as a verb this way. And to ask someone, "Do you like thrifting?" Jessica from our team and I sort of bonded about this. We both love thrifting.
I love that. All right, very cool. And what would be another example? So, I'm not above wearing used clothing,
I love
right?
this. I've definitely said this, right? When people talk about it,
Yeah.
like, "Yeah, I'm not above thrifting. I'm not above wearing used clothing," because some people do want everything to be new. They're looking for
Yeah.
new name brands, trendy clothing. And then so this
Mhm.
might be something, this phrase, this chunk to say you're not above something means like, I've got no shame. I
Yeah.
don't think I'm too good for this.
Oh, man, I just try to avoid shopping entirely. I don't know, or have people gift me things. I just don't even wanna go into any shop. I just
I
wanna
get that. Yeah.
stay away. So, we all have this is a great connection skill for our listeners today. What is your
Absolutely.
style? Because this is another one of those skills that says a lot about who we are, right?
Absolutely. Yes, definitely.
Okay, Aubrey, where to next?
Yes, our last term for today is hand-me-downs. This is what we called it growing up, and this is often like if my older sister had something that she no longer was using, maybe it fits me now, we would call this a
Mhm.
hand-me-down, like she's handing it down to me. So clothing passed on to another person after
Yeah.
it was used or outgrown. I have a neighbor that gives me hand-me-downs from her son for my son. It's
Oh,
amazing,
for sure. Oh, yeah, I still use this term, hand-me-downs, right?
for sure.
What would be a sample sentence, Aubrey?
Yeah, so I could say I had older sisters, so I wore a lot of hand-me-downs growing up. So it's
Mhm.
a noun like this, right? Any of this used clothing we would call hand-me-downs if someone passed it along to you.
And how do you write this? It looks like a compound noun with multiple words. How do we write it,
Yes, it's
Aubrey?
hyphenated. Hand hyphen me hyphen down or downs if it's
Uh,
plural. Yeah, good
uh-huh.
question. A lot of these compound nouns are hyphenated.
Yeah, and it's not like we would conjugate this, right? Even though or in any way,
It's
we
not a
wouldn't change it.
verb.
It's
Yeah.
just a noun, so it stays the same. It would
Yeah.
just be plural or
And we
singular.
do
Yeah?
that we'll separate the chunk to make it a verb, and hand is
Mhm.
the verb, right? So, "She
Mhm.
handed me down some clothing," we'll
Ah,
say, right?
we
Like
would conjugate it. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but it would
Mhm.
be just hand that we would change, and then it would separate there wouldn't be hyphens if we
Yeah.
turn hand into a verb.
And we never change the pronoun. We would never say hand you down. No, never.
"I'm going to hand you down this. I'm gonna ha" No, we would just say, "I'm going to give you this," right?
At
"I'm gonna
least
give
not
you
as a
some clothing
noun.
if you can use
Yeah.
it." Right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good. Okay, what else, Aubrey? What else do we need to know?
Yeah, so I think there's an interesting cultural piece here. For me, Lindsay, I'm going to ask you if it's the same for you. I wouldn't
Mhm.
ask someone like, "Would you like my hand-me-downs?" or "Would you like my son's used clothing?" There are different ways to say this. I
Mhm.
think the assumption is if someone else is uncomfortable with me implying that they need used clothing, what I
Right.
would say is like, "Hey, I have a stack of clothing my son has grown out of. Would you like to see if you could use any of it before I donate it?" Something
Yes.
it's interesting how as I thought about this, I'm like, this is an interesting cultural thing in the US where we're sort of careful about how we offer hand-me-downs. Do you agree, Lindsay?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I may not use the actual word hand-me-downs referring to what I'd
Right.
like to give the person. Just talking about growing out of is a key vocabulary word today too, right? This person,
Yeah.
my child has grown out of it. I'm gonna donate it. Would you like to check out what I have? That sort of
Exactly, and
thing.
that's how it's been to have a neighbor, and, she hasn't said, like, "Want my hand-me-downs?" It's like you're devaluing it to call them that, right? You could say,
Mm,
"Oh, I've always worn hand-me-downs," but if you're going to offer used clothing to someone else I love
right.
this way of just being, "I have this clothing."
Yeah.
It's
Y
interesting, right?
yeah, you're devaluing it when you're offering it, but when you talk about it, if someone says,
Yeah,
"Oh, love your jacket. It was a hand-me-down. I can't believe it." Right? That's okay. That's
right.
not devaluing it, right?
Right, it's
So
just
it's
it's an
yeah.
offer. It's fascinating, actually, it's
Mm.
very cultural, and I'm curious where you guys live, is it the same? Or is
Yeah,
this, not a part of your culture? How do people look at hand-me-downs? And I feel like this is different depending on the person as well, depending on if you were raised using hand-me-downs, or I think some people are raised to maybe spurn them a little bit.
for sure, and I think especially in our era of fast fashion, we're becoming more aware of the environment. This is a
Right?
good movement. I think our culture is kind of moving more in the direction of handing down clothing. I
Yes.
think it's good to save the environment because there's so much water that's used. I mean, not good, right?
Exactly, more and more
Mhm.
companies are offering this. I know at H&M, there was, like, a clothing donation bin for a long time, and they would make new clothing out of that. They would use the recycled garments
Oh,
to make
that's
clothing.
good.
So I think that's happening more and more too, exactly like you said, Lindsay, as people are more aware of, this is so much better for the environment to try to use clothing as much as possible.
Yeah, for sure. Let's break into a role play here, Aubrey, and we are chatting about our shopping habits. Very common conversation, right? All over
Absolutely.
the entire world. Okay.
Right, yes.
All right, let me see. Let me scroll up here. All right. So, I haven't found any good secondhand clothing shops. Do you know of one?
Yeah, there's a good one on Maine. I take our hand-me-downs there.
Oh, I tried that one and was surprised by the prices.
Oh, yeah, that's true. They pay a bit for used clothing, so they charge more. Almost the same as seconds as at the outlets.
Ah,
Yeah, so this is
nice.
interesting. This is I've seen this a lot too, where there's one near us called Urban Exchange where you can take
Mhm.
used clothing there and they will pay you for the things that are really good quality. So then
Right.
of course, when people are buying clothing there, even though it's used clothing, it's a little pricier.
Right, and they do pay you when you donate to Good or no, is it just donations
No,
at Goodwill? No, it's just
just
donation
donations
and you
at
drop it off.
Goodwill. A lot of
Okay.
places you just donate, yeah.
Okay, so that's kind of a higher end thrift store,
Right.
right?
And often it
Something.
will be
Mhm.
sort of newer clothing or brand name clothing because sometimes they'll only purchase those items.
So we differentiated here really clearly, right, between hand-me-downs and secondhand clothing shops, right? I said, "I haven't found any good secondhand clothing shops in town. Do you know of one?" Right?
Yes, and then I'm saying I take our hand-me-downs to this thrift store, but then I share they pay for some of the things I'm turning in, so that's why they're a little
Uh,
pricier.
yep, exactly, and yeah, exactly, and you're saying they pay a bit for used clothing, so they charge more. Makes sense.
Yeah, and
This
then
is
I say almost the same as seconds at the outlets where this is more
Mhm.
specific. These are
Yeah,
new clothing, for some reason are sold at a discount, but they're not secondhand, they're not used.
right. In this case, the used clothing would be at a similar price point to the
Right.
seconds, right?
Exactly. Mhm.
Wow, Aubrey, what's our takeaway for today? I feel like we're digging into a true connection topic for our listeners. Yeah?
Yes, definitely. I love that you mentioned how, using hand clothing is better for the environment. I actually saw this stat by ThreadUp did a report that said if every consumer this year bought one secondhand garment instead of a new one, that it would lower carbon dioxide emissions by more than 2 billion pounds. I was
That's
shocked by that.
amazing.
Yeah,
Wow.
and granted, that's every one of us, right? So, but we can make a
Yeah.
difference if we're willing to buy used clothing, use used clothing instead of purchasing new every time.
Yeah, and honestly, sometimes I don't have the best fashion sense. I just kinda don't really think about it.
Yeah,
It's not really a part of my life that much to think
same.
really hard. So sometimes I will go to these used, clothing stores to find better fashion ideas because I assume the person that donated it had a better fashion
Right.
sense than I
Like, somebody
do.
owned this, somebody believed this was good clothing to wear, so I'm gonna
Right,
get it. I love that.
it's been vetted, right? It's been
Yes.
vetted.
But I also love what you said, this is a great way to connect, right? Our Aden and I connected about used books. You can connect about your shopping habits, trends, like you said, Lindsay, shopping is always a fun connection topic.
Exactly, and we are always looking for these connection topics so then we can focus on that exchange with the other person. Focus on getting to know them and how the way they shop reflects who they are, then we can forget about making mistakes, and we can that's why
Exactly.
we're here, right, Aubrey? Love it.
Yes, absolutely, guys, right? It's all about that connection.
I love it. So good. Aubrey, thanks for hanging out. Guys, don't forget to check out the All Ears English app, allearsenglish.com/app. We'll see you over there. All
Awesome.
right.
See you next time, Lindsay.
Bye, Aubrey. Have a good
Bye.
one.